Tony Starks, a Marvel character more commonly known as Iron Man, is America's favorite superhero. But why? Well, he represents an archetype many would like to embody. He's wealthy, charming, handsome, and a technical genius. Most people don't realize, however, but the character of Tony Starks is based on a real person. Let's begin by reviewing the script. Tony Starks was born rich. His father was an inventor and wealthy businessman. Unfortunately, Stark's mother and father died early, leaving the empire to the young Tony. Starks would vastly expand the business his father left behind, dazzling the world with his technical genius, handsome looks, and of course, charm with the ladies. Tony Starks is also a polymath, well-versed in physics, aeronautics, and engineering. His vast wealth combined with his genius and notoriety gives him unlimited social power. The character of Tony Stark seems almost unrealistic to us. Most people see it as an idea that someone should attempt to make real. But the truth is quite the opposite. Tony Starks is an idea based on a real person. So who is the real Iron Man? Well, it is none other than the aviator himself. This is the story of Howard Hughes. Howard Robert Hughes Jr. was born in Houston, Texas on Christmas Eve of 1905. His father, Howard Robert Hughes Sr., was a successful inventor and businessman from Missouri. His father invented a two-cone roller bit, which allowed for petroleum drilling in previously inaccessible places. Hughes Sr. made a fortune by licensing his patent and later founded the Hughes Tool Company in 1909. At a young age, Howard showed an incredible aptitude for science and engineering. He built a wireless radio transmitter at just the age of 11. At the age of 12, he created a motorized bicycle. This got him in a local newspaper, by the way. At the age of 14, Howard took his first flying lesson. This would spark a passion that would remain for the rest of his life. Despite his mechanical brilliance, Howard was pretty much an indifferent student. He did not even graduate high school. Nonetheless, his father arranged for him to sit in math and engineering classes at Caltech by donating money to the school. Howard would then return to Texas and formally enroll at Rice University. It is during this period that a tragic incident would hit home. Howard's mother, Aline Stone Gano, died from complication during her surgery. This was in March 1922. Howard was only 16 at the time. 2 years later, Howard Sr. would die of a heart attack, leaving Howard Hughes, who was now barely 18, as the sole heir of the Hughes Tool Company. Instead of continuing his education, Howard dropped out of Rice University and moved to Los Angeles to pursue a career in the movie industry. He would also marry Ella Rice, the great niece of William Marsh Rice, founder of Rice University. The couple lived in LA, while Howard was working on his movie career. Howard's uncle was Rupert Hughes, a famous movie director and novelist. Howard would spend months on set learning the movie business from his uncle. Once he soaked up enough information, he went off to the movie business for himself. His first movie was a disaster, but the second film, Everybody's Acting, released in 1926, would be a hit. At just 21, Howard was a movie producer with a confirmed hit. His third movie, a year later, Two Arabian Nights, was also a hit. He even won the Academy Award for Best Director for this film. This made Howard a famous movie director at just 22. This whopping success emboldened him to take on an even larger project, Hell's Angels, a World War I aviation film. Howard wanted to make Hell's Angels as realistic as possible. In order to achieve this, he ordered real vintage World War I planes and hired numerous professional pilots. Howard was also obsessed with military flight formations and had his pilots spend countless hours rehearsing them. 2 pilots even died during production. Howard also suffered his first plane crash while shooting Hell's Angels, suffering a serious blow to the skull as he landed from a rehearsal flight. All this, of course, costed a lot of money. The budget was spinning out of control. By the time Hell's Angels was complete, movies with sound became the fad. Hell's Angels was a silent film, and Howard did not want to be perceived as out of touch. Despite objections from his staff, Howard re-recorded several scenes to include dialogue. Some actresses even had to be fired due to having an unpleasant voice. Hell's Angels went down as one of the most expensive films ever made, costing Howard a whopping $3.5 million, the equivalent of $53 million today. When released, Hell's Angels was a box office success, earning $2.5 million over the course of its run, and receiving an Academy Award nomination for Best Cinematography. But with a production cost of $3.5 million, Howard was still at a loss. This would not discourage him, of course. He would go on to produce another hit in 1932, Scarface. This film would have a 1983 remake with Al Pacino that we are all familiar with. Very few people know, however, that this movie actually started with Howard Hughes. Hell's Angels might not have been a financial success for Howard, but it had inflamed his passion for aviation, which led him to found the Hughes Aircraft Company in 1932. He would also buy majority shares in Trans World Airline Company, also known as TWA. While TWA dealt with commercial traveling, the Hughes Aircraft Company designed and built the world's fastest airplanes. Howard Hughes himself would be the test pilot for many of these aircrafts, a daring job indeed. The first prototype designed by Hughes Aircraft was the H-1 Racer, a swift, ultra-modern airplane designed by Howard and his team. The H-1 would influence the design of many future fighter jets, by the way, such as the F-35 Raptor and the Navy's Crusader fighter aircraft. Howard would push the H-1 Racer to its limits and set the world speed record for flying at 352 miles per hour.
As ship is raised from runway and wings into the air, raps are coming off craft that has long been called the mystery plane. And then the mystery unfolds as its owner, backer, builder, and pilot, Howard Hughes, brings the plane in from its test flight for a landing at the dangerous speed of 75 miles an hour. It's only 1935, yet millionaire sportsman Howard Hughes has flown over 300 miles an hour.
As a result of this feat, Howard was given the Harmon Trophy, an international award given to those with an outstanding performance in aviation. The trophy was given to Howard by President Roosevelt himself. This was 1936. Howard was merely 31 years old, and he was already an Academy Award movie director and record-breaking aviator. I'd like to pause here and mention that just like tech is the hottest thing everyone talks about today, aviation was the hottest thing everyone talked about back in the 1930s. Howard being a record-breaking aviator basically gave him the status of a megastar. On July 14, 1938, Howard set another record by completing a flight around the world in just 91 hours, beating the previous record set in 1933 by Wiley Post. For this flight, Howard took off from Brooklyn's airport Floyd Bennett Field, making stops at Paris, Moscow, Siberia, Fairbanks, and so on. He then returned to New York City, where he was given a warm welcome by Mayor LaGuardia. This record would earn Howard a Collier Trophy by the National Aeronautics Association. Howard would win many more aviation awards, but an ominous event would soon upset the nature of things: World War II. During the Second World War, German submarines were ruthlessly sinking Allied ships and troop convoys. Since ships were so vulnerable to submarines, the military needed an alternative method of transporting troops and equipment. Known for his aviation genius, and also well connected with President Roosevelt's son, Colonel Elliott Roosevelt, the military contracted Hughes Aircraft to produce fighter jets, munitions, and more importantly, giant flying boats that would serve as an alternative to the sea transport of troops. The engineering challenges Howard faced building these planes took a toll on his health. He would eventually fall far behind schedule on delivering these vessels due to the mental stress. One prototype Howard was designing was the XF-11, a reconnaissance aircraft for the Army Air Force. As always, Howard insisted on personally testing his aircraft, but this would not end well. An oil leak during flight caused Howard to lose control of one of his engines. He tried an emergency landing, but ended up crashing down in Beverly Hills. After destroying 3 homes, the fuel tank exploded, setting fire to the plane. Howard managed to pull himself out of the flaming wreckage, but laid beside the aircraft hurting. Fortunately, he was rescued by Marine Master Sergeant William Durkin, who happened to be in the area visiting friends.
Howard Hughes, famous flyer and sportsman, was dragged out of this wreckage of an experimental plane he was testing. He was seriously injured. After ripping the corner from 2 homes in Beverly Hills, California, the plane finally plunged into this house. The force of the impact virtually wrecked the building and caused the plane to catch fire. The flyer said that the accident was due to motor failure shortly after his takeoff. He failed to make a crash landing on a golf course. Dennis O'Keefe, film actor, inspects damage done the home of Lieutenant Colonel Myers, chief interpreter at the Nuremberg war trials. America's aviation trailblazers willingly pay the price in man's conquest of the air.
Howard sustained significant injuries in the crash: a crushed collarbone, multiple cracked ribs, crushed chest with a collapsed left lung. His heart shifted to the right side of the chest cavity, and numerous third-degree burns throughout his body. The doctors thought he had little chance to live. As Howard laid in a hospital bed, however, he realized the design was lacking. The bed was simply too static. He called in his plant engineers and designed a customized bed built in 6 sections and operated by 30 electric motors with push-button adjustments to allow for body rotation and movement. This bed Howard designed would serve as a prototype for the modern hospital bed we know today. Howard had crashed his F-11 airplane in 1946. It was now 1947, and he had somehow managed to miraculously recover. With this medical battle behind him, Howard suddenly found himself in front of a new contester: Congress itself. I mentioned this was the year 1947. World War II ended in 1945. Congress and the military was not happy. They did not receive a single airplane from Hughes Aircraft during the entire conflict. Howard was called to testify before Congress as to why no airplane had been delivered. According to Howard, however, Senator Owens, who was leading the congressional hearing, was using this investigation as a technique to get him to accept a merger deal with Pan Am. For those who are unfamiliar, Pan Am stands for Pan American World Airways. They were once the largest airline in the United States, but would later be acquired by Delta.
Papers say that you're going back to Washington, is that correct?
Yes, I'm going there to testify before Senator Brewster's War Investigating Committee. As you know, the committee has caused quite a stir by its investigation of my 2 airplane projects, the XF-11 photographic plane and my large flying boat.
$40 million has been paid by the government to the Hughes Aviation Company, and nothing has been thus far received. What became of the $40 million is what we want to know.
So I ask you this question again, Senator Brewster. During my last trip to Washington, and while we were having lunch in your suite at the Mayflower Hotel, did you or did you not offer to call off this entire investigation if I would agree to merge TWA, Trans World Airline, with your friend Juan Tripp's Pan American Airways?
Well, that's it for part 1 of this episode. In part 2, we will look at the congressional hearing and Howard's life afterwards. Before we go, however, let's take a look at some of the beautiful starlets Howard dated. Howard's romantic life can be a book in of itself. The billionaire aviator was quite successful with the ladies. He dated many Hollywood stars. Here's a glimpse at some of them. Howard dated Jean Harlow, a Hollywood actress and American sex symbol. She was nicknamed the Platinum Blonde, or the Blonde Bombshell, and would have a 10-year career in Hollywood. Jen Rogers is another gal that was with Howard. She was an American actress, dancer, and singer during the golden age of Hollywood. She's considered an American icon by many. Ava Gardner, an Academy Award actress, dated Howard Hughes in and out over a period of a decade. The two actually had a violent fight where they apparently beat each other bloody. Thankfully, the maid had walked in and put an end to all this madness. Katharine Hepburn is a 4-time Academy Award-winning actress. Her career in Hollywood spans over 60 years. She dated Howard Hughes for a year and a half in the late 1930s. Fun fact, the love letters she wrote to Howard have been sold on auction for $15,000.
Howard, we're not like everyone else. Too many acute angles. Too many eccentricities. We have to be careful not to let people in, or they'll make us into freaks.
After Howard finished his flight around the world, he was invited as an honored guest at a Hollywood benefit dinner for animal rescue. The host of the event was famous actress Bette Davis. The two had an affair in 1938. She would later say,
I was the only one who ever brought Howard Hughes to a sexual climax. So he said at that time.
Betty would divorce her current husband with anticipation of a marriage proposal from Howard, but that proposal never came. Howard would go on as a bachelor. If Howard's dating life is making you feel, well, average, do not despair. For not even a wealthy, handsome, billionaire genius like Howard can have it all. He once offered the English-American actress Elizabeth Taylor $1 million to marry him, and he was promptly rejected. Elizabeth Taylor would go on to marry a construction worker. I guess there are some things money can't buy after all. See you next time.